Welcome to PlayPianoToday.com. This is Chapter 1, taken from the series titled Intros, Fillers, and Endings. One of the most popular questions that I get asked by students is how to create song introductions. Or how do you create fillers between verses and choruses? Where do you get the material to come up with that? And then when you get to the end of the song, how do you wrap it up? How do you create an ending? This is a really great resource. Let's dig into intros, fillers, and endings. Chapter 1. Every great song has an interesting introduction, some filler between verses and choruses that keeps you interested, and then a good solid ending. But how do you come up with this material? Well, the first technique is the most obvious and simple one. You use material that already exists in the song. Typically for the introduction, musicians doing this technique will just simply play the first line through instrumentally before the vocal starts. And then between the verse and the chorus, do the same thing again. Might seem a little repetitive, but again, it's a simple way to start, just using material that already exists. Now for the end, musicians using this technique will do something called tagging the end. Remember, we're using material that already exists. To tag a song means to take the end of the song and play it again. A lot of times when musicians will tag an ending, they'll play it, and then they'll play it 2 more times for a total of 3. Don't know why. Psychologically, it just feels good. Feels like you're done 3 total times and you're out the door. Now, I'd like to show you this simple technique, but then we're going to move on to some more creative ideas for intros, fillers, and endings. But first, here's the example of the first technique, using material that already exists. For the sake of being real clear, I've picked a very simple song. It's a pretty song, but it's very simple, only 4 chords. F, B flat, C, and E flat. And if you watch real carefully, you'll see that I'm throwing some higher extensions like major 7s and major 9s if you're into that. But that's not what this lesson is about. I simply want to show you now technique number 1, how to create intros, fillers, and endings from material that already exists. Okay, here's the introduction. And on the bottom, you can see that I'm playing the same chords as the first line of the song. Play it through twice. And then the vocal would start. And the chords are the same. And you'd be singing about your dearly departed parakeet or something. Okay, then the song would go into a bridge, which is some new material. But at the end of this bridge, watch, I'm going to create a little filler. I'm actually not going to create it. I'm just going to play the first line of the song again before it goes into the next verse. Here it is. So I'd play the first line of the song a little bit. Then the vocal would start again, singing the second verse. Okay, and then we're getting to the end here. So we're going to repeat that little section 2 more times for a total of 3. So the beautiful thing is you didn't have to exert any brain power to come up with any new material. It's already there. You use the beginning and then you tag the end. That's a real simple way. It's been done down through the years. It's real effective. I'm not trying to disparage that at all. It's a good technique, but it's just a simple way to start. There's a lot more creative techniques we can do, and we're going to start exploring those in this series. Let's dig in. Before we head into technique number 2, I want to head something off at the pass. You might have noticed in that song that even though I was just playing 4 simple chords, I was still playing all over the keyboard and playing lots of different interesting notes. Hope it was interesting to you. Those are what's called rhythmic patterns. And those rhythmic patterns are such a powerful technique to learn. You can take any song and learn to play all over the keyboard with interesting arrangements completely by ear without having to have the written notes on the page. Rhythmic patterns are the premise for the original course on our site. The name of that course is Pattern Piano and Keyboard. You can find it at playpianotoday.com. If you haven't gone through that, make sure you do. It will allow you to really cut loose on the keyboard. Okay, there's my sales pitch. Then let's go on to technique number 2 for intros, fillers, and endings. Like I mentioned, there's an infinite number of intros, fillers, and ending possibilities you can do for any given song. The first was very simple. We just used material that already existed. But now, from here on out, we're going to come up with new creative ways. So we'll maybe pull a little bit from material that exists, or maybe we'll do things that are brand new, just to give fantastic creativity, oozing with creativity in your songs. So now we're going to move on to a brand new technique to create intros, fillers, and endings. It's called descending lines. Descending lines have always been popular in music. If you're a child of the 70s, you know what this tune is. Of course, that tune is usually played on guitar, but it sounds great on piano too. But one of the reasons that descending lines are so powerful is because your ear is leading somewhere. And if you notice, I'm going down chromatically right now. That means every single note in the left hand. I could keep going. It's amazing how much emotion descending lines can evoke. So we're going to use that technique to create intros, fillers, and endings. Now, because I want to give you lots of stuff to chew on, we're going to study a couple different levels. We're going to study a 2-chord progression, so it's going to descend just by 2 notes, and back and forth, just 2 notes. Then we're going to go a little further, and we're going to descend farther down the scale. In addition, once we go further, we're going to talk about major 7 versus dominant 7 sounds. All of these techniques are really based under the same heading of using descending lines to create intros, fillers, and endings. So I hope you brought a big appetite to this lesson. There's lots of stuff for you in here. Now, just quickly again, if any of this seems over your head, go back and check out Pattern Piano and Keyboard. That's the foundation to get you playing up to speed by ear. And then come back. One of the things that I really like to do is explain things in depth, all the way down to the foundation. And sometimes when you're going through a lesson, you've got to say, hey, check this out. It's built on this, which is built on this, which is built on the bedrock of whatever you're talking about. So today, we're talking about descending lines and using them to build intros, fillers, and endings. And we're going to run down for a minute, down into the basement, and we're going to examine the bedrock of the chords and the scales that these lines are built on. Why? So that you understand, and so that you can stand on my shoulders then and take what I've given you, and you can go far beyond what I'm doing. That's what excites me. So let's examine for a while, right in the middle of this lesson, some chords and some scales, and really get some knowledge so we can put them to use. Different kinds of chords evoke different kind of emotions, obviously. If I played something like this, it really doesn't bring to mind images of a sunny day. Instead, it might make you think of like a funky get-together with your friends. Kind of a bluesy feel. But if I played something like this, it's like it's Saturday and you don't have to go to work. And somewhere far in the distance there's a lawnmower running, but it's not you mowing the grass. So it's very happy. I'm playing different kinds of chords, even though I know it's a gross oversimplification. The first batch of chords I played had primarily minor sounds to them, including minor 7s and dominant 7s, and the second batch had major sounds, including major triads and major 7s. There's a lot of music theory in there, but what I'm trying to say is that on a real simple level, minor sounds tend to be darker and tend to be more funky. Major sounds tend to be a little more happy, a little more bright. So depending on your mood, you're going to use minor sounds or major sounds. And maybe you're saying, I can hear the difference between major and minor, but what's the difference based on? It all comes down to something that's kind of gotten a bad rap down through the years, especially with piano players for some reason. It's the old term scales. Now, some will hear that and it'll bring up images of their old piano teacher rapping them on the knuckles. If that's you, you just got to get over it. Once in a while, you'll hear a piano player complaining about scales. But you'll never hear the great piano players complaining about scales because they know it's really the key to unlocking being able to move around freely on the keyboard, as well as understanding things on the keyboard. So let's take a second now and talk about scales. Just one scale in particular, the major scale. And for simplicity's sake, we're going to look at the C major scale. You probably know that the C major scale is simply the white notes on the piano. That's why everyone uses it for an example. It's just very simple and easy to see. Now, I went up and down by single notes. But if I build a 3-note chord or a triad, and I went up and down in triads using just the notes from that C major scale or just the white notes, I'd be building all kinds of chords that music theory buffs could define, like C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, or B minor flat 5, and back to C major. But that's not the scope of what we're studying today. For the sake of what we're studying today, we're going to boil it down and say you can play a triad anywhere as long as you use notes from the C major scale, and you'll stay within the key of C. You won't risk falling off the abyss into another scale. Okay, let me show you a little exercise now. Let's do a little descending line using just the white notes, and it'll sound pretty good. You could define those chords if you want to. But suffice it to say that I'm just using the notes from the C major scale, and everything works. And it pushes you back to home. Isn't that a great concept? Just in and of itself, that's very interesting, that you can be creative in the key of C just by playing the white notes. The technical term there is called diatonic, and it simply means to play notes that are within the scale. But hey, not everything's in the key of C, and thank goodness. Otherwise, the world would be kind of boring. And since we're not musical babies anymore, let's check out a new key and do the same technique, but in the key of F. Remember in the key of C how easy it was to move around because you just jumped around on the white notes. Now the key of F is a little bit different, not much, but there's a brand new note that shows up. A black note, B flat. There's the full F major scale, and again that's based on a pattern. It's not just an arbitrary scale. It's based on a pattern that I'll show you in Pattern Piano and Keyboard. So based on that F major scale, I can jump around now and play any white note I want, except for B's. They have to be B flat. Do you see that? Every time I get to a B, I'll play a B flat instead. It's actually not much different than the key of C. I'm playing mostly white notes, except for that B, which becomes a B flat. So it's kind of a new way of thinking. Instead of thinking of all those incredibly complex chords everywhere, you just start thinking, okay, what's the tonal center? Or what is the key that I'm in? And then you let your ear dictate the notes that you choose. It's a really interesting way to improvise. We've been down in the basement just for a few minutes looking at the bedrock foundation of chords and scales and how that enables you to really move around with confidence in a key. Now we're going to use just a small part of that as we build an intro based on the technique of descending lines. We're finally ready to put an introduction together. We're going to build a 2-chord progression descending line. You know how to do this now. Remember the example I just showed you? To descend from F, you got to descend to the next scale tone in F, which is there, right? Pretty simple. And since it's a 2-chord progression, we're going to go back and forth and just back and forth. Of course, that's starting to sound like the movie Jaws, so we've got to pretty it up. But you know what to do. Add some scale tones from the scale of F. And all of a sudden the music is open and it's relaxed. And if you would ever get tempted to use a B, remember in F you got to use a B flat. And now you're doing what's called vamping. Vamping means to just move back and forth in a predefined chord structure. And in this case, we're doing a 2-chord progression waiting for the vocalist to start. Man, where's the vocalist? But once they would start, you'd move out of this progression into the song. Remember that? So they'd be singing on here and belting it out about their parakeet. But remember, we're going to go back to that 2-chord progression, and we're going to use it as a filler between song sections. So here it is again. You do your little descending line. The vocalist is getting ready. And then it would go into the next verse. Now let's go further. Let's take the same concept. Instead of a 2-chord progression descending line, let's use a longer chord progression. Watch how this changes things. How about a 4-chord progression descending line? So I can grab scale tones from F anywhere I want to. Sounds a little different than the last one. We're going to go a little further, grabbing tones from the scale of F. A little Motown sounding. Isn't that funny how it gives it just a different character when you start grabbing different scale tones? And we're going down farther. We're going down 4 notes in the scale of F. And then it go into the tune. And then at the end of this verse, and we'll cut it short here, we'll go right back to that same 4-chord descending line used now as a filler. Remember what I said earlier, this stuff is infinite. Let's look now at a couple variations on the themes that we've looked at so far. And up to this point, everything that we've played in this lesson has been based on the major scale of the key that we're in. Well, what if we change the scale a little bit? What happens? The character changes. Let's check that out. What if we took that same scale and changed one more note? What if we changed the 7th note? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What if we lowered it a half a step? Now instead of a major 7, which is in the key, right, or diatonic, now you have a minor 7th. It's a real important note, especially in bluesy and funky music, because that really forms the sound of the dominant 7th chord. In the course titled Pattern Piano and Keyboard, we went through every conceivable type of 7th chord. So make sure you've gone through that so you understand what the basis is of all these fantastic 7th chords. So now we have 2 black notes in F. B flat and E flat. Okay? So now we're going to vamp around. We're going to go back to just the 2-chord progression descending line. So we're going to go down from F to, be careful, we're going to go down to E flat, right? Because we've lowered the 7th, okay? Check that out. That is such a different, darker sound. The B flat was lowered from the F major scale, and now we're lowering that E flat as well. It's kind of nice, huh? I'm kind of getting distracted. I just want to play a little bit. To wrap the whole thing up now, if you want your song introductions and fillers to sound a little more gritty, a little more bluesy, do what I just did. Play any notes from the major scale in whatever key you're in, except when you get to the 7th note of that major scale, just lower it a half a step. All of a sudden, your sound will have that dominant 7th sound that kind of harkens back from the blues world. Now, if you really want to get extra funky, check out our blues course. You can find it at keyboardblues.com. And then go to Chapter 11. Chapter 11 deals with every conceivable type of blues scale. Once you get those under your hand, come back and throw those on top of what we did today, and you're going to bring the house down. It's so much fun. By the way, this technique works fantastic over everything we've done in this lesson so far. In fact, go back and get out your keyboard and go through that section on the 2-chord progression descending line. And just like I showed you, you can pick any notes you want from the major scale of whatever key you're in. But this time, when you get to the 7th note of that major scale, lower it a half a step. Maybe that dark, rich, delicious sound you've been looking for will be coming out of your keyboard. It also works fantastic for the 4-chord progression descending line. Either way, you've got a lot of stuff now to pull from to come up with great introductions, fillers, and we talked about the tagging of the ending. So there's plenty of stuff to work on in this chapter. In the next chapter, chapter 2, we're going to check out something called the pedal tone technique. And this really is an incredible technique. The reason I say that is because it's so simple. And you can actually piggyback on everything that we've done in this lesson, and suddenly you have a whole new flavor. I love things like that. In the meantime, come on over to playpianotoday.com. In this website, there's a wealth of online piano and keyboard lessons that you can dig into right away, including this lesson.